A few years ago, Renee and I went to Sydney, Australia. Going to Australia had been on my bucket list for a long time, and I was finally going. I worked in reservations for a major airline at the time, and flight benefits is one of the perks. It's standby, so it's not guaranteed. If there are seats available, you get on. If not, you wait for the next flight, that kind of thing. After several flights took off with no availability, we needed 2 seats, not 1. We finally made it to LAX. It took about 10 hours, and we barely got there in time. The flight from LAX to Sydney started boarding when we arrived at the gate. There's only 1 flight per day from LA to Sydney. If we don't get on, we'll have to spend the night in the airport and wait until 10:55 p.m. tomorrow. As everyone boarded, we waited with heavy anticipation. Finally, they called our names. We got our boarding passes and headed down the jetway. While waiting to get on the plane, I glanced down at my boarding pass to see where I'll be sitting for the next 17 hours. It said 2B. I thought to myself, oh my God, that's business class. I asked Renee what hers said. She said 2C. I whispered to her, that's fucking business class. I felt like I'd just won the lottery. We boarded, put our shit away, and ordered some drinks. They're complimentary in business class. They ended up running out of bourbon, so I started draining their rum supply. Pirate. The flight was the longest I've ever been on. Plus, crossing the international date line is kind of like going into a time machine. Takeoff at 10:55 p.m. Friday night. Fly 17 hours. Arrive at 7:45 a.m. Sunday morning. It's a trip, literally. We arrived just a little hungover, deboarded the plane, and went to baggage claim. We got our bags and took a cab to the hostel I reserved. It was called the Sugar Shack. Now, I know it sounds bad, but it was fine. We had a private room, but we still met with several people from around the world in the public areas. It was cool as hell. I don't know how many times we heard, I love your accent. With a big smile, I'd respond with, I love yours too. We did the whole touristy thing while we were there. We walked around the Opera House, got a selfie in front of the Harbor Bridge. We went to Bondi Beach and got a little sunburned. The water was beautiful. We also went to the Blue Mountains and saw the Three Sisters, along with the enormous valley below. It was breathtaking. We went to a petting zoo because Renee wanted to pet a wallaby. I enjoyed seeing all the different kinds of critters. Owls, ostrich, wallaby, koala, kangaroo, and a white peacock. I took a picture of the entrance to Luna Park, but decided not to go in. It was just a little too creepy looking. Of course, we had to do a ghost hunt or ghost tour while we were there. Surprisingly, there weren't any paranormal investigations we could join. It was ghost tours only. After some research, I found one that looked pretty good. The Rocks Ghost Tour in Sydney. They've been doing this for several years. They're one of the top-rated historical tours in Sydney. The stories are pieced together by locals and historians with information handed down through many generations. They were stories you won't find on Wikipedia. The Rocks is sort of a time capsule of early European life in Australia. Much of the Rock's architecture is relatively unchanged from when it was built over 200 years ago. With that comes the original spirits that wander freely through their familiar haunts. This was no silly sideshow. We learned some very creepy and macabre stories surrounding the Rocks. We started out in Foundation Park. It's the remains of 8 terrace houses built in the 1870s. They were each 2-room apartments and measured a tiny 3 meters by 3 meters. The most incredible part was the parents and 4 to 10 children lived in each one. Chairs and tables were placed in each one to demonstrate how cramped things were. Think of the Brady Bunch living in a studio apartment. One of the chairs is said to be haunted by a grieving mother still searching for her young child. She appears sitting in the chair with her hands over her face. If you approach her, she'll get up and start to walk away, searching for her little girl. Then disappear. She didn't make an appearance while we were there. Nearby, a small cave had eroded out the side of the sandstone wall. According to the lore, deep in this cave were several hiding spots for pirates to hide their smuggled goods. Gold, tobacco, and, of course, rum were the usual stores. One pirate got a little clumsy, though, probably drunk, and was followed into the cave by a constable. When the constable confronted the pirate shot at the policeman. He missed. He was definitely drunk. The constable was caught off guard and stumbled to the ground. With knife in hand, the pirate charged the lawman. The constable quickly drew his weapon and fired. The pirate fell on top of him, dead on impact. Even today, the pirate continues to protect his spoils. The tour guide showed us what looked like a cubbyhole dug out of the wall of the cave. He said it was one of the smugglers' hiding spots for their loot. If you stick your hand in the alcove, you might feel something. I quickly volunteered. I stuck my hand in the dugout and held it there for a few seconds. I didn't feel anything. Renee stuck her hand in there. She instantly pulled it back out. Hell no! What? What happened? It was like I put my hand in a bag of spider webs. She hates spiders. Serious arachnophobia. But there were no spider webs in the alcove. She rubbed her hand briskly. Ew, she moaned. The tour guide said that's a pretty common manifestation. They say it's due to the pirate trying to get you to take your hands off his booty. Other folks tried it, and some felt the spider webs and some didn't. It seemed pretty random and very strange. As we were leaving, we heard something that got thrown in our direction. It sounded like a rock. We stared into the cave for a minute, then left. We continued to the next stop. We arrived in front of an older-looking house called Cadman's Cottage. It was built in 1816. It was used as housing by governmental boat captains and their crews. It is the second oldest surviving residential building in Sydney and the first building built on the shoreline of the Rocks area. As the story goes, a sailor was visiting his boss, a ship captain, who was living there. The two got into a heated argument, and the ship captain warned he would stab the man with the old sword hanging on the wall if he didn't leave. The man left, but returned later. He snuck into the house while the captain was sleeping and struck him over the head with an axe, killing him instantly. He wanted to dispose of the body, so he hacked off the captain's limbs and tried to burn the body in the fireplace. However, the fat from the body caused a chimney fire. He quickly climbed up on the roof and doused it by pouring water down it. He then cut up the body further and stuffed it into a wooden chest. He tried his best to clean everything up, but some of the blood seeped into the floor to the apartment below. Try explaining that to the insurance company. The man dragged the chest to the jetty next to the cottage and tried to get the boatman to help him sink it in the water. He told the boatman the horrendous smell was from rotting pork, but the boatman figured it out and contacted the police. After being convicted, the man was hanged several months later. We told our tour guide that we brought some ghost hunting gear and would like to see if we could get some evidence. He said, sure, no worries. I figured if anything, it'll add a layer of validity to the tour. I did a quick sweep of the fireplace and around it with my ghost finder and got a beep or two inside the fireplace. I made an oh face at Renee. She said she had a heavy feeling about the fireplace, so she took some pictures of it. In one of them, she caught what looks like a faint orb in the fireplace. I continued to slowly scan around, but the EMF didn't alert again. As we were leaving the house, Renee heard a voice upstairs say, "Help me." I didn't hear it. She told the tour guide about it, and he said that disembodied voices have been reported in and around the house. We walked for a few minutes down some pretty dark and sketchy alleyways. We probably wouldn't have done it if it was just me and Renee, but since we were part of a pretty big group, I wasn't worried. Besides, we were already in beast mode. Our next destination was a merchant house. This place is said to be one of Australia's most haunted locations. In the 1800s, a rich businessman came home from work and found his wife in bed with another man. He chased her through the house, cornering her in the bathroom. After a short struggle, he strangled her to death. Her ghost is said to be looking out the window of the second floor wearing a shiny necklace. I guess the dude she was with just bailed. We started taking pictures of the window. We both took several. We didn't see anything. I wandered even closer to the house and looked in the door window. Everyone else started walking away, but we stuck around for some reason. As I was looking at the stairway, my nose almost touching the glass, I heard the faint sound of squeaky wooden stairs, like someone was walking down them. I fumbled with my camera app and took a picture of the doorway showing the staircase through the window. I could still hear the footsteps. When I checked the picture, I couldn't see much through the dirty glass. From what I could tell, though, I didn't get anything. Well, except for a pretty good personal experience. We caught up with the group and our fearless leader, who, by the way, looked a lot like Russell Crowe and sounded like him. So he was like a Russell Crowe ASMR. He was telling the story about a house that was above ground, but is now underground. It was the 1880s, and the Rocks area was a haven for criminals, pirates, gamblers, and wenches, or prostitutes. It was a favorite hangout for these types. The house was an opium den turned brothel, but it was fronted as a farm. They had horses and even a horse trough. It was a dark time for the Rocks, and the police chief decided he had to do something drastic. That's usually not good. So he and his men raided the brothel and arrested several men and women. During the sweep, one of the male patrons was convinced he could get away. Hearing the commotion in the other rooms, he hastily threw some clothes on and made for the window. He was on the second floor. As he was climbing out the window, a constable entered the room and told him to halt. He smiled at the officer and jumped. His loose pants got snagged on the railing during the jump. His body spun around and he landed on his head with a low thud. He was dead. Shortly after that, the building was completely covered over by the city. Like the city was trying to move on, I guess. Out of sight, out of mind. We got to access the underground building that's not open to the public. We took pictures relentlessly. So much to see. The kitchen, the toilet, the old well, and the fireplace. It had modern-looking stairs and handrails, but everything else was OG. While scanning different areas, I got a few beeps on my EMF. They seemed concentrated in one area. I asked everyone if it was okay that we try to make contact with whoever is here. As I figured, everyone was more than cool with it. Renee pulled her divining rods out of her pack, or some folks call them dowsing rods. She said, "Cross the rods for yes, open them for no. Do you understand?" The rods didn't move for a few seconds. Then they slowly crossed. "Thank you." She centered the rods. "Did you die in this house?" At this point, nobody was saying a word. Even the tour guide seemed genuinely interested. The rods crossed again. Yes. Someone from the group blurted out, "What's your name?" Renee corrected them. "It's gotta be a yes or no question. Are you a male?" Thinking maybe it's the ghost of the guy that tried to get away from the cops. The rods opened up. No. So they're a female. I asked, Did you work here, sweetie? Some folks snickered at my not-so-subtle flirt. They crossed. Yes. Starting to piece it together, Renee said, "Were you killed by a customer?" The rods crossed. The tour guide spoke up and said that several prostitutes were killed here back in the day, most by their Johns. The tour ended after that. I left out a few stops where we didn't get any responses or evidence, but all in all, the ghost tour was pretty fucking kick-ass. We thanked Russell Crowe, I think his name was Phil. We thank Phil for allowing us to do a brief investigation on the tour. He told us he had no problem with it. He said he 100% believes in the paranormal. He also advised he had never seen divining rods in action before, and he was quite impressed. He said he's going to get himself a set. Who knows? Maybe he'll incorporate them into future tours later on. We left for the U.S. the next day. We didn't get business class on the way back, which pretty much sucked. After reviewing the shots we took, we realized we didn't get a lot of evidence, save a few orbs. But we had a ton of personal experiences. I love Australia. Someday, we'll make it back there, and we'll see if we can get some spooks to show themselves.